And it started.
All right, so my presentation will be about debugging ASP.NET Core in Kubernetes from Visual Studio. So basically, what is the concept? For everybody, debugging is easy locally, right? So you just have to select debug configuration and run your application, and then you can debug. So there's a bigger challenge when you want to do it remotely, right? So you have to enable a remote debugger and have some type of connection, and then you can debug. And even bigger challenges when you want to do it in a container running in a cluster, right? So what actually is Kubernetes for those of you who don't have any experience with this? So it's basically a container orchestration system. Well, it groups containers that make up an application into logical units for easy management and discovery. So it's an active open source platform, which was originally developed by Google, but now it's living its own life and it's free. So it's giving you the freedom to take advantage of on-premises hybrid or public cloud infrastructure, letting you effortlessly move workloads where it matters to you. What is debugging? I think that everybody knows what it is and we use it every day. However, I'm not sure if you all know how does this exactly work. Well, I will be talking about intrusive debugging, especially. What does this mean, intrusive? It means that we freeze application to reason the information at human speed, right? So generally speaking, Windows provides an API for writing debuggers that let you examine and modify memory in another process and let you get notifications when exceptions happen in this process. In the Unix-derived world, there's an API called btrace that does essentially the same sort of things as Windows debugging API. So the debug process sits in a loop waiting for notification from events from the process under inspection. So to set a breakpoint, the debugger process modifies the code in the debugged process to cause an exception. The compiler and linker work together to make the symbol information about the program available in a format that can be read by debuggers. So in our case, it will be the PDB files, right? A .NET PDB file only contains two pieces of information, and that is source file names and their lines, and also the local variable names. All the other information is already in the .NET metadata, so there is no need to duplicate the same information in a PDB file. So what about remote debugging? So there is a small program placed on the remote machine that communicates with and acts on behalf of the actual debugger running on the local machine. And for this case, we will use a debugger VSDBG, which was developed by Microsoft. Well, there are also other debuggers provided by, for example, Samsung or JetBrains. However, for convenience, we will use this one. And it's also cross-platform. That means it can run on Linux, macOS, or Windows, or anywhere. So how it's actually done in practice? I will show you step by step. So be with me. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I will use Helena service as an example to do this. The main idea of this service is to serve images. And the main idea of the service was it to be able to scale it horizontally accordingly to the load, accordingly to the network traffic, so that it could be scalable. And the idea was to run it in a container. So here you have our Docker file, And what's important, if you want to debug it, we have to set the configuration to debug. So that's the first step. A second step, as I mentioned earlier, is to install the debugger. So we have to apply this single layer, and in this layer we install the debugger. And Microsoft has provided us a really convenient tool to do this, because we only have to get from this simple link a bash script that will install the latest version, or any version we want. I chose latest to the given location. So if we have already created our image, I actually use another really convenient tool in Visual Studio to create this image and publish it instantly to the given repository. I won't be showing you this process because it's quite long and dull. To be honest, I've already done it earlier. So I have created this debug image and pushed it to our repository. We can see our repository here. Well, if this is remote repository, to be specific, but you can do it with your local repository. It can be actually anywhere you want. So we have our image here. Okay, so what's next? We need to have a cluster, right? Because we want to debug it in cluster. So I think that's obvious. I can show you first on the example of a remote cluster, which is actually running on a different machine, and a local cluster that is running on my machine. So a very important thing, you need to have a Kubernetes command line tool installed. And this command line tool is called kubectl. And this command line tool has to be configured. And this configuration has to be matching the configuration of the cluster in which you want to debug your application, right? So for example, right now, my kubectl is configured, I think, with my local cluster. I will see. Okay, so I can see there is one pod, so it's probably my local cluster. I have to switch this configuration by editing this config file. I have already done it earlier, so I have prepared this configuration file. So it will match the cluster, our development cluster, right? Okay, let's see now. And it has changed. As you can see, these are the pods running in our development cluster. Okay, I will explain to you later why it is crucial. So let's go to our deployment. Let's select our deployment and let's edit it. Okay, it's already here. First of all, if we want to debug the application, we'll need only one replica, so there's only one pod. Secondly, we need to specify our image. I have created an image with this tag, explicitly calling it. Well, it actually doesn't mean it. You don't have to write these letters. You can write these numbers, but I just write it here so that everybody knows this is a debug configuration. And just save and close. Okay, I think it has updated. Let's see. Okay, it looks like it is running. So let's go back to our Visual Studio. What we need here, we need an extension. We need an extension to make this easy and convenient, and this extension is just called Remote Debug Launcher, right? I have already installed it, so I won't be showing you this process. Second thing, what is needed for this debug session? We will need a simple two-line script written in PowerShell. Basically, what the script does, it extracts a certain pod name with its ID. And as I mentioned earlier about this command line tool, kubectl, it is really important because I'll show you how it works. right now I have configured my kubectl to work with a remote cluster. And here it gets the name of a certain pod from this cluster where it is configured. So afterwards, the script will get the name of this pod, certain pod, and it will run a visual debugger inside this container. Second file, which is also really important and actually needed, is launch.json. In this file, we specify the path to our PowerShell. We specify our script, and we specify configuration. In this part, this process name is really important, and it actually depends. It actually depends on our Docker file, because right here I used entry point, and I just write .NET and our assembly. And what it does, it runs the process by .NET, which is named .NET actually, but it can, the name can be different. For example, if I use like CMD, well, it will also work, right? The application will start, but I will have to write something like this, like, yeah. And then the process name be the name of the assembly. So I think we have already everything we need to start debugging. So let's try it. We have to right click on the solution and select remote debug. Okay, it has started loading some symbols. Okay. So I have set a breakpoint right here. I will try to get image from this pod. And as we can see, the breakpoint is hit. We can see the ID here. It matches our ID here. So I think it works. Okay, let's continue. And everything works fine, right? So after we are done with debugging, that's quite important because we just can't hit stop because it will kill our application in the cluster. All we need to do is just click detach all, and it's done. As I said earlier, if you don't want or if you don't have access to like any development cluster or integration cluster, you can do it as well on your local cluster, right? You can just install Docker desktop, and it will provide you with a cluster in which you can do whatever you want. As you can see right here, this application is connected. Oh, something went wrong with my cluster. And this application is already running in my local cluster. Okay, so I'll switch to my local cluster. Already switched. I have already made a deployment in my local cluster. But if I want to debug it in my local cluster, I have to change my configuration again so that the command line tool will match with my local cluster. Okay. Let's go to deployments. Let's change it to debug. And it is running. Okay. Okay, let's try to engage the session. Okay. And let's try to make a request. Something went wrong. Okay, I haven't specified the address. Let's get to this pod. Okay. Okay, as we can see, the breakpoint was hit. And it just works well. Okay. So I think that's all.
Well, that was really quick, Paweł. So, Paweł, thank you very much for your extremely interesting presentation. But I think we are left with a lot of time to the next presentation. So, if you have any questions to this process, this is a nice time to ask them to Paweł right now. Yes, Tomasz. I will allow microphone for Tomek. Yeah, Tomek.
Okay, hello. I have a question about this extension because it's a little strange that you were using extension to use the remote control, and this extension was only downloaded 114 times, if I could see that. And there is a lot of different way to use the debugging in Kubernetes, something like the bridge to Kubernetes or any probably different extensions. So why do you choose to use this extension and debugging in that way?
Well, it worked for me, and it was pretty convenient and easy. Yeah, I think the easiest way to do it for me. So if you have any better way, you can contact me and show me any better way.
No, I've never tried before. I'm just make a quick research
Oh,
about
okay,
that.
okay.
So that's the way that I'm asking you about that because it's. I don't think it's the best way. So.
Well, I have done a little bit of research, and in my opinion, it was so far most convenient way.
Okay. So I don't have any more question.
But Tomek, if you have anything else that you've checked and have pleasure in using, well, we can set it up as a presentation on the next Dev Day, because I haven't told it to you before, but we are going to make this Developers Days preferably once a month. If of course external conditions will allow us. So maybe next time, Tomasz, you're very welcome to make a presentation of the alternative way of debugging applications in Kubernetes.
Yeah,
Anybody else?
But first I have to check that and write any application in Kubernetes. It was just like something that I saw on the presentation, and it was strange for me because every time when I using any extension for any application, I'm choosing this one which has the most best ratio, like downloading and rating, and this one was like something strange, and I don't know who wrote that. Who wrote that extension, because it's not so popular, and
Yeah, maybe this is just a rising star of the extensions.
Maybe. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else would you would like to ask the question? Well, if not, we will make then a break till 12 o'clock, and on 12 o'clock there will be two There will be two presentations, one after another. First of all of them will be about nice things that you can do in Microsoft Teams to make your life easier and to make your documentation and other information more grouped together. And the second one will be a short presentation about the last feature that we have in our Longinus logging platform, also connected with Longinus, also connected with Kubernetes. This will be the functionality of gathering the logs from Kubernetes directly into Longinus log system. So for now, thank you very much. We'll be back on 12 a.m. Thank you very much.